Welcome, dear friends, to Highlights on the Book of Action and Reaction. This week we will be reviewing and studying together these highlights. It's entitled Increased Debt, Leo, and it may seem a little daunting because it's like, oh, how sad. You increased your debt that you are incarnating already with debt and you cause more. But it actually is very uplifting because we see the divine wisdom in it, all of it really. So this chapter opens up where we left off in the previous chapter. We learned in chapter 11 about the temple and the parlatory. In this chapter, they actually are beginning where they left off, where they're in the parlatory now. And these minds, these souls that are in the parlatory, they are minds that are not yet able to enter the temple. Mm-hmm. But it's important to understand why, because Silas explains that they are not able to draw within them this reverence and this ability to even take the light in the room. He even goes into more detail about the photons and the electromagnetic abilities of that particular temple, that they would disturb it.
Right.
And we learned in chapter 11 that the temple from Ansel Paz is like the heart.
The heart.
And if you screw up the heart, you're going to screw up the body. So they don't want to do that. But what's interesting is that while they are amidst this sea of people that are praying, that are asking for help, it's not so chaotic. Although at first we were like, wow, this is pretty all over the place, people are all over. But Silas tells us that there are people stationed, good noble volunteers that wish to organize the complaints, the stress of the spirits that are suffering, so they can either offer support, offer some more some type of support, assistance. Yeah, he even says that in some cases they would go to the earth to help them in case, and which is a case we're going to discuss today.
That is correct.
Which is the case of Marina.
Before, just a highlight also, I think it's important for us,
Sure.
and you mentioned as well, the idea of increased debt, but there are different types of debts that we will be also touching bases in different chapters in the future, the mitigated debt, the other types of debt that we will see.
Frozen debt.
The frozen debt, the stationary, if you will. But there are different type of debts, and the help is there. The beauty is, as you said, the beauty is that we are receiving assistance. Everyone who is reincarnated, perhaps coming out of Mansão Paz, they are reincarnated and they are still receiving the assistance, as we will see in this case.
Right.
So they're amongst the crowd, and what happened? There is, with Hilario, Andre Luiz, and Silas, there's this lady who comes screaming and asking for help, and we can just imagine that, someone will walk in through this ward, if you can call it that way, and this lady comes and, please, pleading help to Silas, and he sees in that moment, he stops amongst everything else that he would have to do there with Andre Luiz and Hilario, again, teaching them as well, and say, okay, this is a moment that I can help. But also, this is a moment that we can utilize to learn, to the learning experience. And what she's doing is begging for help for her daughter. And it's a beautiful thing because we see that also, Hilario and Andre Luiz, they emphasize on this idea that the mothers, the female figure, is always there praying for the family, is always touching. And he actually asks, he says, noticing that Silas becomes silent, Hilario remarked, the number of women praying and giving assistance around here is really impressive. So we can imagine. And then he says, yes, it is. Very few wives and mothers can leave for happier regions without their loved ones. A woman's immense love is one of the most powerful forces in the divine creation. It's a beautiful thing that we see, the emphasis that we give of the motherly love. How, we can utilize that as an expression of this beautiful love, of the love that Christ himself taught us as well. So just something that we would like to kind of look into it, and what happens afterwards. She comes for help, and what develops after that?
Well, they begin to sort of describe about who she is, and they say that, and basically Silas is explaining to Andre Luiz and Eladio that the case, which is basically the case of Marina, which is Louise, and the woman's name is Louisa. Her daughter Marina, who's incarnated on the planet Earth, is going through very harsh trials caused by her own hands, unfortunately. And Silas explains that 30 years ago, Marina lived in Mansalpaz. She was a ward there, and she now is basically being watched over. She, and currently she's going through many difficulties. She's on the verge of committing suicide and ending it all because she's in such a situation, she's distraught. So what do they do next? Something very loving. They go immediately, because Silas even says that there's no time to waste. They volatate till there, because they say, you know what, to take any form of transportation would be a waste, because we don't know at any moment she could take her life. And it's beautiful when he goes to meet Marina. Of course, he's a spirit, and so is Andre Luiz and Eladio. So when Silas, in his infinite wisdom, when he goes to speak to her, they explain that she doesn't hear him necessarily with his own ear, with her own ears, but he envelops her in this love, and she has this intuition. So she begins questioning, she begins praying, because she picked up the poison to drink it as she's kissing her little daughter who's very ill goodbye. And it's in that moment that Silas comes and intercedes and inspires her to pray. In that moment when she prays, eventually she accidentally knocks over the poison. So, and then from there, Silas begins to unravel her whole case, at least in that small span of time. He explains how, and our dear listeners and viewers, we wanted to say, go and read this particular part in the book, because it's a lot of details. We don't want you to miss out on it. And of course, this is just highlights. So,
definitely highlights.
But basically, she caused the situation she was in. And Leo, we like this so much. You know why? Because oftentimes we look at people's lives and we say, how sad, and we should have compassion, but we say, gosh, life is really gotten them down, like God is punishing them, or what a circumstance, this person's so nice. Because in this particular life, only in this life, her husband's forced, in a sense, to go to a hospital because he contracted or developed leprosy, so he has to go to the hospital specifically for lepers, and she's left alone with her very physically and mentally ill daughter, and she has no means to make ends meet. So she's in this destitute situation, and by all means we should have compassion, but we see previous lives have brought her to the current situation, that she needs to have the courage to endure that. And that's, Leo, what her mother does for her. Right after Silas puts her under this particular sleep, he gives her this type of passes where she falls asleep and she's detached from her physical body, and the mother comes, and what does she say to her? It's very beautiful, these loving words to her, right?
Exactly, loving words of persistence, of courage, to keep, be faithful to God, be courageous towards the situation, because again, as you said, who is she reincarnated with right now? None other than the person who she has wronged in the past, and then again, and then she commits the same
act.
The same act that now it's just something that now it's in a much worse situation, that she's reaping the consequences of the way she has acted towards this little one who in previous life was her sister, and so was in this lifetime as well, that she does the same thing. Obviously, again, we want you to read as well, and make sure that you read the whole thing, because it's just beautiful. This is just a highlight, but we see that she's not suffering by just because God,
is cruel.
Oh, exactly, God is cruel. But she created a situation, and now she has, through that suffering, rescued herself, rescued the little one who has also reincarnated with several issues, and she's reaping these consequences that she has created in the past.
That's interesting, Leo, because you mentioned her daughter, who's who's mentally and physically handicapped in different ways because of something that she, the mother, had done previously. Not only in just this life, but in a previous incarnation, almost a century prior. So it's like history is sort of repeating itself because of habit of what we have. But it's interesting because if we look at it as a one-sided perspective, we say, oh, poor child, she's born with a handicap. When in actuality, this child previous incarnation was driven to kill herself. So you can go and read, it's quite elaborate in the details that exist, but we see that divine justice and God's plan is perfect for all of us. And that if we had the courage to do what Louise's mom was telling her to do, is learn how to suffer well, which is beautiful.
Well, it is. As we have been studying these cases, as we get together to analyze these cases, we truly have to express our compassion towards, and it's hard for us to see with the eyes of one lifetime.
Exactly.
It's very hard. We really have to dive in this the deepest studies of Spiritism that brings us the light of many lifetimes, of many gatherings, if we can say, because if I'm suffering in a situation like that, I mean, of course, my loved ones, the people that I love, that I live with, they also are suffering. And you see that the collective rescue here is just immense.
Exactly.
And we see on chapter 5 of the Gospel according to Spiritism, the teachings that we receive. And there is a passage that truly tells us on how to connect with the teachings on chapter 5.
Yeah, and it's the part in that chapter, because every chapter has instructions from the spirits, right? And Lacordaire is the one who brings this particular message. It's item 18, and it's this idea of learning how to suffer well. And actually says it's entitled to suffer or well or badly. And it's interesting, Leo, because it's something that we know that probably even our own mentors, not only just in this book, it's sort of God wants us to learn how to suffer well. And this particular area in the gospel is so pertinent to this chapter, because how many of us know how to suffer well? Anytime we go through a difficult situation, we complain, why me? Why do I have to endure this? Or we're somewhat rebellious to it. But the spirits, not only in the gospel according to Spiritism, in the spirits book, various aspects of Andre Luiz collection that was psychographed by Chico Xavier, we learn about the beauty of resignation, because Marina is a perfect case of this necessity. She needs to learn how to be resignated with the situation, because that's going to be her remedy for the situation. So we love that saying that within the illness is the cure.
Is the cure. It is certainly, and this is one of the main highlights, if we will, for our dear listeners, that once more we emphasize for you to read, that let's resign to our situation. Not that we're going to sit around and wait for something to change, but resign with a courageous act of, I can do better. I can be a better person than I was yesterday. And if I can find the reasons for my suffering today, as it says on chapter 5, of the Gospel according to Spiritism, let us look in the past, but with compassion with ourselves as well, with others that are living with us, the difficulties that we're suffering collectively and individually as well. So we hope that this can lead and guide you in a way that when we're facing our difficulties, difficult moments in our lives, that we can say, you know what, this must be for a reason, because there is a master in chief and commander, right, analyzing and helping us daily, and as we see throughout these teachings. So we hope that you can enlighten your lives with these teachings, and until next time.
I wish you many blessings.